What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. It is Saturday, March 1st, 2025, and I have some breaking news to share with you guys. Right now it is 15:55 Eastern Time here in the United States, and we have some major breaking news coming in from Mexico and from Alaska. So it looks like the US is getting ready to invade and or strike Mexico, and it looks like the Russians may have cut another undersea cable in Alaska. So Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told top Mexican officials that if they do not deal with government and cartel collusion, he would direct the U.S. military to take unilateral action. The Journal reports that Hegseth said this in a January 31st phone call with leaders in the Mexican military who reacted with anger and shock. Sources reported to the Journal that Mexican military officials believe Hegseth was suggesting a U.S. invasion of Mexico. Now, we already have U.S. recon drones flying over Mexico right now, and we've been seeing a lot of reconnaissance along the border of Mexico. We actually have an RC-135 airborne right now on the border of Mexico, and it took off from Offutt Air Base, which is the home of U.S. Strategic Command. And we had one flying along the border of Mexico 2 days ago. So something is definitely brewing over there with the U.S. military on the border of Mexico. We're hearing that a Stryker Brigade combat team has now been deployed to the Mexican border. The 10th Mountain Division has already been deployed to the Mexican border. Guys, you don't move a Stryker Brigade combat team to the border of your country for no reason. Okay, a Stryker Brigade combat team is huge. Okay, Strykers are fully armored. They have a 30-millimeter gun. Okay, they're very, very powerful pieces of equipment. And internet and phone outages in Juneau affecting certain customers stem from damage to an undersea cable, according to Alaska Communications, which said Friday evening that it was seeking alternative solutions for connectivity while working towards a full repair of the line. We are actively working and will be working throughout the night to get a backup solution in place to get Southeast reconnected as quickly as possible. In an update posted at around 12:30 p.m. Friday, Alaska Communications wrote, "Our technical team has confirmed damage to the ACS Subsea cable system connecting Juneau. We are dispatching a repair ship. We do not yet have an estimated time for restoral." AT&T also provided a prepared statement on the situation Friday. Customers in the Juneau area may be experiencing service disruptions due to damage to an undersea cable operated by another provider, an AT&T spokesperson wrote. The official webpage of the Alaska Legislature and other state agencies, such as the Permanent Fund Dividend Division, all based in Juneau, remained offline. So this is absolutely huge. We know that there was a subsea cable that was taken out in the Bering Sea just a few weeks ago. And last year there was a subsea cable in the Bering Sea that was taken out as well. Now this cable taken out near Juneau. Okay, so 3 cables already have been cut in Alaska in the last year or so. And my guess is it's probably the Russians. And that's why we've had all this reconnaissance over Alaska recently. And I want to just show you guys what's going on over the U.S. right now. So we have this RC-135 rivet joint, which is a recon plane that took off from Offutt Air Base, home of U.S. Strategic Command, and it's patrolling the border of Texas and Mexico. Okay, so this is a strategic recon plane. Okay, so these planes have side-looking radars that can look for hundreds of miles from where they're flying. Okay, so they can look deep into northern Mexico here. We also have a U.S. nuclear war command and control plane over the Ozarks right now. These planes are responsible for communicating with our submerged nuclear-armed submarines. We also have an RC-135 rivet joint over Tennessee, looking south towards the Gulf of America and towards Florida. And my guess is this is probably security for Trump's MAGA rally this evening. Also, we have some aerial refueler activity over Florida as well, probably related to Trump's security. And last night, China tested a new missile, possibly a hypersonic missile, although it looked like a ballistic missile to me. The test was spotted in the Inner Mongolia region of China, and here we actually have a Cobra Ball plane that was in the Sea of Japan, and these planes can detect and track missiles. So this was the U.S. keeping an eye on this missile that China was testing, and here we have footage. I'll play the footage for you.
哇，导弹！哇！我活了一辈子，第一次接导弹。
媳妇儿，你这是导弹，
导弹二次推进。哇！许个愿吧。
哦，从手机上看就跟一条线，这个假的。
哇，导弹！这不是卫星发射回了？
不是。
哦，
我去。
Wow, look at that. Doesn't that look crazy?
哦，妈导。
Totally insane. So China is continuing to expand their military. They're continuing to build new missiles, and they're also building new silos in China. Okay, the Pentagon and the CIA estimate that China could have as many nuclear weapons as we have within just a couple of years, which means that China and Russia together would have more weapons than we have. Okay, so that is very concerning, but I believe the official estimate from the CIA was that like within the next 5 years, China's going to have 1,000 deployed warheads. Okay, we have 1,500 deployed warheads. So does Russia. So this is very concerning. Russia and China together will have double the amount of warheads deployed as we have. This is very, very concerning. We need to rapidly rebuild our nuclear arsenal. Hopefully Trump will do that. And the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, spoke to both U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Friday night following their shouting match in the Oval Office, a Downing Street spokesperson said. So it looks like Keir Starmer tried to be maybe a peacekeeper. He spoke to both of them. Starmer said that he retains his unwavering support for Ukraine and is playing his part to find a path towards a lasting peace based on sovereignty and security for Ukraine, the spokesperson said. The Prime Minister looks forward to hosting international leaders on Sunday, including President Zelensky. So there's going to be an emergency meeting on Sunday in the UK with various European leaders. Also, Italy is going to be hosting some kind of an emergency meeting. So Europe is now panicking because of what happened yesterday in the Oval Office. And in my opinion, it's a sign that we're continuing the path towards World War III, the irreversible path towards World War III. The Bible says that before Jesus returns, there's going to be pestilence, there's going to be war, there's going to be famine. These are things that are irreversible. There's nothing we can do to stop it, okay? And Zelensky refused to apologize to Trump in an interview on Fox News yesterday evening, right before he left the U.S., and I was playing that interview in the live stream last night. A White House official said that Zelensky's Fox interview was insufficient. The official added, he keeps insisting on security guarantees on this economic deal, and we've made clear that won't be part of this. Okay, so basically the whole argument comes from the fact that Trump wants to stay 100% neutral. He doesn't want to take Ukraine's side. He doesn't want to take Russia's side. He doesn't want America involved in this war. He doesn't want to drag America into this war. And he made that clear afterwards. And Zelensky obviously wants the U.S.'s support. He sees the U.S. as an ally. And Zelensky probably got disappointed because Trump didn't show that support and because Trump didn't want to provide security guarantees. And so basically Trump and Zelensky see this whole situation completely different. Trump is looking at it as, we don't want to get involved in this war. We want to end it as quickly as possible. We don't want it to escalate, and we don't want to be involved. And Zelensky's looking at it as, we need help from the Americans because they're the most powerful country in the world. And what they say and do has a huge weight. So, fundamental disagreements. And as good as this economic deal may have possibly been for Ukraine, it wouldn't have worked out in the long term because fundamentally they don't agree on this. They don't agree on the situation. So absolutely insane argument yesterday. And Ukrainian sources close to Zelensky said yesterday that Vice President Vance was the real problem during yesterday's meeting. Zelensky needed to show strength, but emotions took over. Vance seemed pleased that negotiations didn't happen. Okay, so that's what Ukrainian sources close to Zelensky said. And we know that Vance is not a huge fan of Ukraine. He even said during the campaign that he doesn't really care about what happens in Ukraine. And he didn't even visit Ukraine. He didn't offer to visit or anything. So that's why they're saying that Vance was the reason behind all this. And another thing too is Zelensky needs to show strength when he goes to these meetings because his people want him to show strength. So if he went to the White House and he basically just sat there like a lapdog, then, his voters would be upset with him, So it's kind of a difficult situation because you had the cameras on these guys and the whole world was watching. And anytime you have a situation like that, there's always the pressure to live up to people's expectations and then egos, so I think it was just the perfect situation for a big blowout like this. And maybe if the cameras weren't on them, maybe they would have been able to talk it out a little bit better. And Trump said that he is not interested in renewing the Ukrainian minerals deal at this time, according to a senior White House official. And U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that Zelensky needs to apologize. And the Trump administration press secretary Caroline Leavitt stated that the U.S. will no longer provide military assistance to Ukraine because their priority is peace negotiations. This decision came after the controversy during Zelensky's visit. We are no longer going to just write blank checks for a war in a very distant country without a real lasting peace, Leavitt said. Okay, that's what she said right after the argument. And Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, ordered a halt on all Russia-related cybersecurity operational planning. Sources indicated that Hegseth instructed General Timothy Haw, head of Cyber Command, who then informed his subordinates of the directive. The order does not apply to the National Security Agency, also led by Haw, or its intelligence activities involving Russia. Sources also reported that the Cyber Command has begun compiling a risk assessment of the order. So this is very interesting. Hegseth ordering a halt to Russia-related cybersecurity operational planning. Very strange. I don't know if this is part of the talks with Russia, if Russia maybe asked the U.S. to stop or something. I don't know. And the New York Times is reporting that the Trump administration may stop all support for Ukraine, including intelligence sharing and military training. So, the U.S. provides a lot of stuff to Ukraine. They have, okay, aside from just giving them missiles and weapons, they provide training, but also more importantly, spare parts. Okay, what's Ukraine going to do when they run out of missiles for their Patriot systems? Where are they going to get new Patriot missiles from? If Trump says we don't want to supply you with weapons anymore because you don't want to sign a peace deal, which is probably what's going to happen, Ukraine is going to run out of air defense missiles like Patriots. And where else are they going to get the Patriot missiles from? The U.S. is where the main Patriot missile factory is located, right here in Pennsylvania, in Letterkenny Army Depot. And in addition to that, we provide satellite intelligence to the Ukrainians as well, and reconnaissance assets, all those planes that I show you guys all the time that fly over Eastern Europe. You know, they also provide intelligence for the Ukrainians, so the Ukrainians know where the missiles are coming from when Russia attacks, or so they could find targets to strike. And U.S. President Donald Trump extended sanctions against Russia for another year due to the ongoing situation in Ukraine. The extension, confirmed by the White House, will see some measures continue into 2026 as part of a continuous response to Russian actions that began in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea and subsequent conflicts. Okay, so Trump extending sanctions. And the Russians attacked a medical facility, residential buildings, a shopping center, and a gas station and a car dealership last night in the Kharkiv region of Ukraine with drones. Okay, so Russia is continuing to attack Ukraine's cities and civilian areas with drones and missiles. Okay, all the while Zelensky's getting chewed out by Trump and his cabinet. Russia's attacking Ukraine. And Trump dismissed General Brown, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff appointed by Biden, and other senior military officials. 5 former secretaries of defense, including Leon Panetta, Lloyd Austin, Jim Mattis, William Perry, and Chuck Hagel, have issued a joint statement criticizing these actions as potentially undermining military effectiveness and have called for congressional hearings to investigate the dismissals. They express concern over the politicization of the military leadership. And a U.S. Navy Virginia-class attack sub made a port visit to Perth, Australia, and this comes just days after China did these very provocative live fire exercises right next to Australia, forcing Australian planes to divert, okay, unannounced live fire exercises like 40 miles offshore from Australia. Okay, they didn't tell the Australians, they didn't put out a NOTAM, no warnings, nothing. Okay, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration today began the mass firing of hundreds of federal employees under the agency and its several child agencies, including the National Marine Fisheries Service and the National Weather Service, which has already been suffering from low staffing over the last few years. The cuts are expected to affect up to 1,800 of NOAA's 11,000 staff across the U.S., roughly 10% of the agency's employees, with a push by NOAA to obtain a public safety exemption for meteorologists and forecasters being largely denied. Okay, so 10% of the NOAA being laid off, including forecasters and meteorologists. Now, I will say this, the NOAA and the National Weather Service have been big pushers of the global warming agenda. And about 1,000 FEMA employees have either resigned or been fired. And Trump has lifted restrictions on U.S. commanders, granting broader authority for airstrikes and special operations beyond conventional battlefields, U.S. officials told CBS News. The move rolls back Biden-era limits and restores Trump's first-term counterterrorism policies. So that is huge news. And Mexico and the U.S. agreed on Thursday to take coordinated actions to tackle drug trafficking, the Mexican government said after high-level security talks in Washington aimed at averting U.S. tariffs. The goal is to reduce deaths due to the consumption of illicit fentanyl as well as cutting down illegal trafficking of firearms, it said. And Mexico extradited on Thursday 29 drug traffickers to the U.S. Apparently, this was a record extradition, okay? Massive extradition of these very dangerous individuals. And Ukrainian forces are continuing to infiltrate the critical town of Toretsk in multiple directions. A Russian attempt at counterattacking was repelled. Ukrainian soldiers have now reached the city center, taking up positions in high-rise buildings. So Toretsk is a very critical town in eastern Ukraine, and it looks like the Ukrainians are pushing back over there. And NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte announced that alliance members are ramping up their defense investments and preparing additional financial support for Ukraine. And China vows to take necessary countermeasures after Trump's announcement on additional 10% tariffs on its imports, with the Chinese Commerce Department secretary saying he hopes the U.S. will avoid making the same mistake again and return to the right track of properly resolving differences through dialogue as soon as possible. Okay, so China threatening to retaliate. And the U.S. State Department said that they raised concerns with Russia regarding access to banking and contracted services needed to ensure stable staffing levels at their embassy in Moscow. And through constructive discussions, both the U.S. and Russia identified concrete initial steps to stabilize bilateral mission operations. And the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, announced the termination of all Biden-era oil and gas licenses that shamefully bankrolled the illegitimate Maduro regime. Acting under the president's directive, Rubio is providing foreign policy guidance to revoke U.S. support for these licenses, marking a major shift in Venezuela policies. Okay, so basically pulling any kind of licenses that could benefit Maduro, okay, the dictator in Venezuela. And SpaceX launched a module to the moon. A Falcon 9 rocket lifted off from Florida carrying Intuitive Machines' Nova C module. In about 10 days, it is scheduled to land in the area of Mount Mutan, presumably the highest mountain on the moon. And Russian Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu arrived in China to meet with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. That's pretty big. He used to be the defense minister. And the Norwegian NASAMS air defense manufacturer plans to establish a joint venture in Ukraine for missile production. NASAMS is basically an air defense system that uses traditional air-to-air missiles like the AIM-9X Sidewinder as the actual missile for intercepting low-flying aircraft, drones, and cruise missiles. Okay, it doesn't really work against high-speed threats like ballistic missiles or hypersonic missiles that are going, several times the speed of sound. That's what you need PATRIOT missiles for. Okay, but the NASAMS are really good against fighter jets, cruise missiles, and drones. But that's the late. And we had massive reconnaissance in Eastern Europe last night and the night before. Here we have a recon plane patrolling the border of Serbia and Bulgaria. This is very concerning because over the last couple of weeks, we've been seeing a lot of recon activity here with RQ-4 Global Hawks patrolling the border of Serbia. And now we have this private plane that is used by the U.S. military to fly recon missions, okay? So something is brewing here in Serbia. And then last night we had more reconnaissance along the Texas-Mexico border. And you can see this P-8 Poseidon Subhunter was flying very low along the entire Tex-Mex border. And then here you can see massive reconnaissance in Eastern Europe. This was the night before Zelensky arrived. And you can see one British recon plane flew all the way up to the Kola Peninsula in Russia. This is where Russia has 2/3 of their nuclear-armed submarines, and this recon plane was flying really close to where Russia has those nuclear-armed submarines, basically keeping an eye on how many boomers, okay, nuclear-armed subs were in port, and that can tell us what Russia's nuclear posture is like, because if they have most of their subs in port, then we know they're on a peacetime stance, okay? But if a lot of their subs are missing and they're not in port, that means that they're ready for war. Because typically submarines usually have to undergo maintenance every 6 months. They come in, they replenish, they do some basic maintenance, and then they go back out again. So, you know, no country has all their subs deployed all the time. They're nuclear-armed subs, okay? Usually half of them are in port in some stage of maintenance or replenishment, and then the other half are out at sea, okay? So if there's more than half out at sea, that means that Russia's posture is ready for war, okay, nuclear war. And then also at the same time, we had this U.S. recon plane patrolling northern and eastern Poland for 24 hours, okay, 24 hours nonstop, flying in northern and eastern Poland. So clearly the U.S. is concerned about something over here. We know that Belarus has just recently done a massive nationwide check of their military. They've called up reserves. They're doing what they call a redeployment exercise, where they're practicing moving large amounts of troops towards the border of NATO, okay, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia. They're practicing moving things by rail and other means, okay? So Belarus is basically calling up reserves and moving their forces to the border of NATO, and then Russia is supposed to bring in 150,000 troops for what they call an exercise, okay, which I don't believe, okay? They're doing the same thing that they did to Ukraine before they invaded Ukraine. They moved all their forces a year before they actually invaded. They moved their forces to the border and said it was a training exercise. And they're doing the same thing now on the border of Poland and Lithuania. Okay, so potentially Russia is getting ready to attack Lithuania and Poland. All right. We also had a U.S. recon plane fly into the Black Sea close to Crimea, which is pretty interesting. Okay, potentially gathering targeting information for the Ukrainians to strike. I want to propose an alternative theory to what happened yesterday in the White House. Okay, what if it was a staged event? What if Zelensky and Trump actually signed an agreement, but they had to play it off like they're in conflict to make Russia believe that, and then secretly, you know, they're basically still providing weapons to Ukraine. They're making this minerals deal, but they don't want Russia to know that, so they staged this whole argument for that purpose. That's a possibility too. And then here you can see a lot more reconnaissance in Eastern Europe. This was Thursday night. You can see an AWACS plane over Lithuania. And then here we have another private recon plane patrolling the border of Romania and Moldova. And here's a closer look at all the recon in Poland. Okay, 2 nights ago, there was also a Swedish recon plane. Then you have the U.S. RQ-4. Then you have a NATO AWACS plane. I mean, this is insane, guys, all this reconnaissance. And then we also had reconnaissance near Taiwan. But that's the latest breaking news that I have. I might be back later on with another update. So make sure you're subscribed, because YouTube's been unsubscribing people from my channel. Make sure you're subscribed. And when you resubscribe, if you were unsubscribed, make sure when you hit the notification bell, select all notifications, okay? Follow me on Telegram and Twitter. I post all my updates over there. Also consider downloading my free app in the Google Play Store. I can send out alerts directly to your phone. I always do that when there's developing situations. I'll send out quick messages through the app so you can stay updated. And I also send out my updates and live streams through the app as well. So if you download the app, you'll never miss a thing. Okay, and it's totally free. And we're almost done building the Apple version that should be coming out very soon. So stay tuned for that. And until the next time, take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 Ps: prepare, practice, and persevere.